Welcome to Dravo Vein. Today's story is what you could call a cabin in the woods story. I know everybody, well, not everybody, but if you follow horror stories, you've heard or even seen movies dealing with cabin in the woods. But this one is another one that our source is Jeremiah. And I do want to point out to all you viewers, as you've seen that we talk about the stories being may or may not be true. That's only because we can't confirm or deny that they actually happen. But our sources are reliable sources. This one being Jeremiah, even though he didn't involve him directly, but he heard the story, one way or the other, how he heard the story. But it's, again, the reason why we don't reveal names and such, because some people can get in trouble with these stories that we're telling, actually. So this is Elijah. Sebastian will be the one telling most of the story, but I'm going to set the stage here. So the husband and wife, they have 3 kids, 2 daughters, and a son, and 3 dogs, if I'm remembering right, with Sebastian. So he's going to jump in at any moment, any details that I'm leaving out. So I'm trying to build a picture for the viewers here. And our editor, hopefully we can show some pictures, find some pictures to go along with this. But anyways, imagine a log cabin in the woods, 2 stories, with a wraparound porch that evidently doesn't wrap completely around the entire house, but almost. And if you notice any of those wraparound porches, they usually have a little wooden railing around the porch.
And they're always covered.
Always covered, that's true, that as well. And have a barn. I mean, this is kind of a working farm, if you will, because they had pigs, right?
Pigs, chicken. I think they had cows for milking. They had goats. They had other animals. They had I want to say they even had ostriches for their eggs.
Okay, that part I didn't remember, but
I could be wrong. But I know they had goats, they had pigs, they had a chicken coop, they did have cows for milking, they had goats. I want to say they had like a couple of ostriches, but I could be wrong on that.
okay, and also something important, the reason why we're setting the stage here, so remember these details, because they're going to come into play as the story goes on. So they had a barn. So envision a barn with one of those lamps, overhead lamps or what, over the barn door, that's between the barn door and the loft. So we're talking about probably at least 10 feet off the ground. This will be important later in the story. And like I said, cabin in the woods, so they're not around anything close. And so the names of these people, we don't even know the names of these people, but the sheriff, I believe it's a sheriff. Sebastian said we're talking about it earlier. I think it may even be, can't remember if it was a sheriff or a game warden, but I guess for sake we're going to say sheriff. But we're not going to say any name. We're not even going to say what state, but you might have an idea, because Sebastian, they moved not long after 9/11, right? Kind of get away from the city.
All right, so the premises of this story is this guy either worked for a law firm or he was on Wall Street in New York. His wife was a school teacher. He's from New York State. She's from another state, but she was a school teacher in the state of New York. I think maybe within the city of New York on the outskirts, the suburbs. But they moved back to her state where her family's from. They lived the next conjoining farm property to where she grew up at. And the state, I'll give you the state, one of 4 states. It's either upstate New York, it's either Maine, Vermont, or New Hampshire. It's one of those 4 states.
Right. And so when he suggested moving out there, she was all for it because that's where she was raised. So this wasn't a matter of a husband just saying, we're going to move, and, the wife grudgingly agrees. No, she was all in on this, ready to go. So they move out to there, and, they're out there for a while, and, you hear noises at night and different things. The dogs would act odd at set times, and they would look outside, wouldn't see anything. And the next morning or next day, they go out when it's daylight and they can look around. They would see footprints of animals, raccoons, rabbits, uh, paw prints of maybe a dog or fox or something. But then things started to get even, that was kind of what you would normally expect for out in the woods. But then things kind of started turning to where odd things started happening. Now, whenever you're raising chickens, yeah, you lose a few chickens to raccoons or weasels, different animals, possums, so it is important. Those who've never raised chickens don't know how it is. Yeah, it's very important the chickens go into the coop. You got to have a chicken coop. You really need to have it fenced so they keep out the critters that does come in after them. But they did notice chickens would be missing every now and then. Didn't think too much of it because that does happen. But when pigs would turn up missing, other things, things that was like, okay, what would take that? And then we said they had 3 dogs. One of the dogs turned up missing. We'll get into that in just a little bit. But these were all heading up to the odd events that started happening. And Sebastian, I'm drawing a little blank here, so you're going to have to take over at this point so I can get my memory refreshed here. But this does involve the husband. The sheriff knew the wife, right?
Yeah, they grew up together as kids. He knew her parents because her mom was also a school teacher. Her mom was his elementary 2nd or 3rd grade teacher.
Right. And so he kind of became buddy-buddy with them, the husband and everything. And this is also important because, that's how he kind of becomes more involved. And there's other people that become involved. So, like I said, things start happening that they can't explain. And the sheriff comes out and even looks around. And they're seeing prints that they can't identify. And also, Sebastian would be able to go in more detail of this, but they would hear things clawing on the house, hear things actually walking around the wraparound porch. And, we're not talking raccoon here, because you might hear a raccoon, but these were more heavier footprints. And then you would see the claw marks, or the scratch marks on the porch, claw scratches on the wall, outside wall of the house, in the log cabin. So it's like, okay, something's odd is going on here. So, yeah, obviously they call the authorities. Of course, their sheriff had become friends with the sheriff, or, the wife always was, I guess, to come out and investigate. But this is where I'm drawing a blank here. What happened? There was something that happened one night, and I've already led into it, but something happened where the sheriff comes out, hey, I need to call somebody else too.
So, basically, weird things was happening. Footprints were seen that didn't make sense. They weren't known footprints. So the wife suggested to call the sheriff of this county. She's friends with him. He comes out, he checks these footprints. He checks these claw marks on the side of a log cabin house. And it's not your typical log cabin house. It's a log cabin house of these people weren't hurting for money. They just wanted to live off of the land, kind of a thing. So the log cabin had claw marks. There was indentations of claw marks on the wraparound porch. So he called the sheriff to come out and take a look. The sheriff looked and was like, I don't recognize these of any animal. They're rather large, deep impressions of claw marks. So he called his game warden buddy to come out and take a look. And these impressions were all over the place. On the barn, on the side of the house, the porch, the front door, all over the place. He called the game warden. The game warden came out, looked at it, and was just like, this is rather odd. There's not wolves around here, but these look like gigantic, enormous wolf prints. But they're bipedal. This is odd. So he looked at the father or the husband, and the sheriff, and decided, I got a friend of mine who's from New York, who who's a Bigfoot researcher. Let me call him out here. So he called this Bigfoot researcher to come out and take a look at these imprints. And he kind of came to the conclusion, and he came out immediately. It was about an hour because it was within close proximity.
And also, he knew the guy, so if that guy caught him, he knew, hey, this might be a big deal, so he came on out. And also, just to note, with Bigfoot researchers, they know animal prints as well, so it's not like they only know Bigfoot prints or look for Bigfoot prints. They can kind of tell you what prints these may be.
Correct. So it was about an hour and a half. The buddy came out, and he's looking around, and he was puzzled. He's like, yes, these are bipedal, but I've never noticed them as Bigfoot footprints because they have huge claws. Yeah, they're human-like footprints, but they're more of a canine with claws, and they're bipedal. He goes, I'm familiar with Bigfoot tracks and other tracks. He goes, but these are wolves. But he goes, I don't want to sound crazy because when I talk about Bigfoot, people already assume I'm crazy. But these are kind of, I hate to be the asshole in the room, but these are kind of like werewolf-like footprints. Like they're humanistic, but canine with huge claws. And immediately the husband, the sheriff, and the game warden was like, A, what have you been smoking? Or B, what have you been drinking? Werewolves don't exist. He's like, I'm just going by what I've seen. You know, I'm a outdoorsman. I'm a gamesman. This is definitely bipedal. It's definitely human-like, but it's wolf-like / canine. And it's got huge claws. They're not Bigfoot prints, but they're not human. They're wolf-like. I don't know what this is.
Now, had the dog already disappeared at this point, or?
No.
Okay, so that's coming up.
Right.
Yeah, what happens, the dog disappears, they do find it, and you want to know here what may have happened to the dog. But now, were the deputies out at this point?
No, it was just, at this point, it was the husband who called the sheriff that the wife knew. He called the game warden, and the game warden knew the Bigfoot researcher guy. So this is who's all is involved right now. So we got the game warden, the husband, the sheriff, and the Bigfoot researcher.
Right, and what they're finding is puzzling, a mystery, if you will.
The sheriff was kind of hesitant with the Bigfoot guy because a lot of people don't believe in the Bigfoot guy. And the Bigfoot guy he's kind of weird, but not everything's Bigfoot. He has plausible explanations for what this is. But even the game warden guy agreed this is bipedal, this is wolf-like, but it's not a known track.
Right. But what happens over the next few days, they all become believers.
Weird things happen, and this is not the next few days. This is over a 2 to 3 year span.
Oh, okay. I thought it was closer together than that. But anyway.
There's a lot of, every night, and every, this is going to sound crazy, but every full moon or the different moon stages, weird things would happen.
Right, I forgot about that detail. Yeah, so and what happens, this is just the beginning of what's happening here. Something's happening on this property, and you have to remember, cabin in the woods, they're away from everything, so it's some mysterious animal, but they're already, crazy ideas are being batting around here. And whether you want to believe this story or not, what happens is makes for a great story. This would make for a great movie, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
So definitely continue listening. You definitely want to hear what happens. This is, As unbelievable as it'll sound, but it's still a great story. I believe it really happened.
When this comes from your special forces friend who saw documents I guess he should not have seen, he told us this on a hunting trip. And for those of the viewers out there that listen to this story, a lot of guys that hunt, a lot of truths come out. Yeah, guys at hunting like to bullshit and tell stories about their wives or whoever they're with or their girlfriends, but there's a lot of truths that come out. This was told around to us, about 15 of us on a hunting trip. Everybody chimed in, tuned in, and when it came from Jeremiah, the Green Beret, and Richie, our other military buddy who's an officer, is like, I've heard of this story. You chime in, you listen to every detail, and as far-fetched as it sounds, when it comes from Jeremiah, and you all don't know Jeremiah, there's some truth and reality. When he speaks, you listen, because he does not BS. This is scary. I hope it's not true, but most likely it probably is true. And there's a lot of cover-ups, because there's so much to this story. It's just like, oh dear God, I hope this is not true.